Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah, always exciting to get into these.
Today we're going to be talking about SilverCrest Metals.
Really interesting company.
Yeah, they've been in the news a lot lately, especially with their high-grade silver mine down in Mexico.
Right, and now this Coeur deal is making big waves.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be unpacking today, their Q3 2024 earnings, how they got here, what this Coeur deal could mean moving forward.
Could be a good one.
Yeah, so let's just jump right into it. SilverCrest brought in a record $80.4 million in revenue for Q3.
Yeah, that's not just good. That's their best quarter ever.
And on top of record revenue in the previous quarter, too. So
yeah, they've been on a roll.
Yeah, just to give everyone an idea of the growth we're talking about here. In Q2, they brought in $72.7 million.
So that's a significant jump in just 3 months.
Exactly. And it's not just the revenue that's impressive. Their mine operating earnings were $47 million.
With a 59% operating margin.
Now, hold on. I got to ask, can we break that down a bit? What does that margin actually tell us?
Sure. Basically, it means that for every dollar of revenue from the mine, they keep 59 cents as profit.
Okay, so after they cover all their operating costs.
Exactly. That's a really healthy margin, especially in the mining industry.
Gotcha. So high revenue, great margins. What's the secret sauce here?
Well, strong metal prices definitely help, but it's more than that. Their sales quantities were impressive too.
Oh, so they sold even more than they thought they would.
Right, and on top of that, their all-in sustaining costs were below their own guidance.
So it's costing them less to produce an ounce of silver than they expected.
Exactly. That's a recipe for success.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And all of this translates to some serious cash flow, right?
Absolutely. They generated $36.2 million in free cash flow this quarter.
Wow, so they've got some money to play with now.
Yeah, it puts them in a strong position moving forward.
Now let's dig into the operational side a bit. Their mining rate was above target, hitting 1,350 tons per day.
Right, and they actually credit part of that to their decision to use 2 mining contractors.
I'm curious about that. Why would having 2 contractors make such a difference?
Well, it gives them more flexibility. If one contractor runs into problems, they have another one to pick up the slack.
So it's like a safety net.
Exactly.
Yep.
Helps them keep things running smoothly.
Makes sense. And they're also pushing the limits with some mill throughput testing at 1,500 tons per day.
Yeah, seeing how much they can push their existing infrastructure.
Wow, so they're already thinking about scaling up even further.
Seems like it. And they're doing a great job with what they have. Their gold and silver recovery rates are exceeding their initial estimates.
Yeah, that's something I noticed too. They're consistently hitting those high recovery rates, which is huge for their bottom line.
Absolutely. Shows they're running a tight ship and maximizing their output.
Now here's where things get really interesting. Their approach to bullion. They're actually holding on to a lot of their gold and silver production instead of selling it right away.
Yeah, that's definitely raised some eyebrows. It's a unique strategy.
Why would they do that?
Well, they're basically saying they believe that holding physical gold and silver is a better store of value, especially with all the inflation we're seeing.
So they're playing the long game.
Exactly. They're betting on the future value of precious metals.
It's a bold move. You don't see a lot of mining companies doing that.
And speaking of bold moves, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the Coeur Mining acquisition.
Right. Coeur is buying SilverCrest in a deal valued at $1.7 billion.
Creating a major force in the silver market.
So what's the thinking behind that? Why this deal, and what does it mean for both companies?
Well, it's part of a wider trend of consolidation we're seeing in the silver market. Companies are looking to get bigger.
So scale is everything in this game now.
Seems like it. This acquisition gives Coeur access to SilverCrest's high-grade mine, boosting their silver production instantly.
And for SilverCrest, I imagine this gives them access to Coeur's resources and expertise.
Right. It's a win-win. They're joining forces to become a powerhouse in the silver world.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out long term.
Definitely a lot to unpack there.
No kidding. We've got record earnings, operational efficiency, a unique approach to bullion, and now this massive acquisition. SilverCrest is a company to watch.
They're certainly shaking things up.
But before we move on, I want to circle back to that bullion strategy for a second. It's such a fascinating concept, and I think it deserves its own deep dive.
Absolutely. It's not every day you see a mining company making such bold moves in the financial realm.
So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll break down the reasoning behind their bullion strategy and what it could mean for the market.
Welcome back.
All right, so we left off talking about SilverCrest's pretty unique approach to holding on to their bullion.
Yeah, it's definitely not the norm in the mining industry.
No, not at all. So I want to dig into that a bit more, try to understand the logic behind it and what it could mean, for the market as a whole.
Well, in a way, it kind of reflects a different way of thinking about things. prioritizing long-term value over short-term profits.
And I know we touched on this before, but I remember reading some comments from Chris Ritchie, SilverCrest's president.
Yeah.
And he was essentially arguing that holding physical bullion eliminates some of the risks that are just inherently a part of traditional mining.
Yeah, basically saying an ounce of silver sitting in a vault is less susceptible to, the day-to-day fluctuations and
the ups and downs.
exactly, the things that can happen at a mine.
Right, like equipment breakdowns, labor issues, all that stuff.
Right, and they also see it as a hedge against inflation, preserving value in a way that fiat currency can't always guarantee.
So it's like they're saying, we're going to hold on to this bullion because we think it will be worth even more in the future.
Exactly. They're betting on the long-term potential of precious metals.
It's a bold move, for sure. And it makes you wonder, could this be the start of a trend? Will we see more mining companies shifting away from those immediate sales and adopting this kind of hold and wait approach?
It's definitely an interesting question to consider. I mean, if more companies start holding back a significant portion of their production, it could have a pretty big impact on the overall supply dynamics of the silver market.
Right. Less silver available for immediate sale could drive prices up, especially if demand stays strong.
Exactly. And we already talked about how silver is becoming increasingly important for all sorts of industrial applications, especially in those green technologies.
Solar panels, electric vehicles, all that.
Right. And as those sectors continue to grow, the demand for silver is likely to just keep pace.
So SilverCrest is basically betting that all of these factors, the industrial demand, inflationary pressures, uncertainty in the market, all point to a future where their bullion is worth significantly more than it is today.
That's a good way to put it. They're taking a long-term perspective, betting on the underlying value of the asset itself.
And bringing it back to this Coeur acquisition, I'm curious how this bullion strategy might play into their plans. Will Coeur continue to hold on to SilverCrest's existing bullion reserves, or will they go a different route?
That's the million-dollar question right now. A lot of analysts and investors are wondering the same thing. It really depends on how Coeur views this strategy and how it aligns with their own long-term vision for the combined company.
Right, so if they decide to stick with SilverCrest's approach, it could be a signal to the market that this kind of bullion strategy is gaining some serious traction and might be here to stay.
Yeah, it could definitely encourage other companies to at least explore similar strategies, especially if Coeur, a major player like them, embraces it.
So this adds another layer of intrigue to this whole story.
Yeah.
A company with a high-performing mine, this unique approach to managing their assets, and now they're being acquired by a bigger player, potentially setting the stage for wider adoption of their unconventional strategy.
It really shows how even in a well-established industry like mining, a single company can shake things up, challenge the status quo. SilverCrest is pushing boundaries, forcing everyone to rethink their assumptions.
And that's always exciting to see. I'm really eager to see what the next chapter holds for them as part of Coeur. But before we get into that, I think we need to take a step back and address another big question. What does all this mean for the average person? Someone who might be interested in silver, whether as an investor or just someone who's curious about its role in the world.
That's a great point. We've covered a lot of ground here. The financial performance, the bullion strategy, the acquisition. But what does it all add up to in the bigger picture? How does it connect to the listener?
Exactly. So stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore the potential implications of all these developments for the silver market as a whole and what it might mean for you. All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into SilverCrest Metals.
It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, we've covered so much, their incredible Q3 earnings, that unique bullion strategy, and of course that massive acquisition by Coeur Mining.
Definitely a lot to process.
Now the big question, what does all this mean for the average person out there? Someone who might be interested in silver but isn't necessarily a mining expert.
Right, how does this connect to the listener?
So let's bring it all home.
Yeah.
What are the key takeaways here, and how do they relate to the bigger picture?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that silver is becoming more and more important. I mean, it's not just a precious metal anymore. It's a critical component of a sustainable future.
Exactly. We talked about how silver is essential for all those green technologies, solar panels, electric vehicles, that kind of thing.
Right. As the world shifts towards those technologies, the demand for silver is only going to go up.
And that rising demand could really impact the price of silver.
Absolutely. If SilverCrest's bet on bullion pays off, it could be good news for anyone holding silver.
Whether it's physical silver like coins or bars or investments in silver companies.
Exactly. This isn't just some abstract financial story. It has real-world implications.
So if you're holding silver, pay attention to what companies like SilverCrest are doing.
Now, the other big takeaway here is that the mining industry is changing. We're seeing this trend towards consolidation with bigger companies gobbling up smaller ones.
Like we saw with Coeur and SilverCrest.
Right, and that consolidation could have ripple effects throughout the market.
It could lead to higher prices as these larger companies control more of the supply.
And it could also lead to more innovation as they invest in new technologies to boost efficiency and reduce costs.
So the landscape is definitely shifting. And it's really interesting to see how companies like SilverCrest are adapting and thriving in this new environment.
They're not afraid to shake things up.
No kidding. That bullion strategy is a prime example. It's sparked a lot of conversation in the industry.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting to see if other companies follow suit. If Coeur decides to hold on to that bullion, it could signal that this strategy is gaining some serious legitimacy.
So what's the bottom line here for our listeners? What should they take away from all of this?
I think the main thing is that the silver market is dynamic. It's constantly evolving. There are so many factors at play, from rising demand to new technologies to geopolitical uncertainty.
And companies like SilverCrest are at the forefront of these changes. Their story shows us that even in a traditional industry like mining, there's always room for innovation.
So keep an eye on this space. The future of silver is bright, and it's going to be an exciting ride.
That wraps up our deep dive into SilverCrest Metals. Hopefully you've learned something new about this fascinating company and the silver market as a whole.
Thanks for joining us. We encourage you to keep exploring the world of precious metals. There's always something new to discover.
Until next time.